So I watched this movie maybe a couple of years ago or so. Just a single word, and it's um it's a single word that somehow, despite its most of its sort of normal usage, it's quite mundane. Farming, quite a rustic sort of concept, really. I mean, normal farming, that is. You know, but this movie is not all as no. I mean, it's closer to any sort of gangster movie, really. I mean, there are gangs, literally, and it's even worse than most. I mean, even gangster movies have some sort of narrative behind them. This is, of course, if it is really based on real life, then real life doesn't usually have a grand narrative, usually. And yeah, I mean, like most gangster movies, it had violence. That's one thing it did have. It was really fundamentally disturbing. So, um, I mean, the synopsis says it's stolen, brutal honesty. It's not sure enough. It's brutal, and but I mean, it's it's quite something how one can almost assimilate. It just makes very little sense. Because the child actor at first seemingly was, I mean, the way he acted seemingly was an introvert, a recluse. So how does one go from there to that, to the end of the movie? And guess if he really had such a childhood, this actor, um, well, it's quite a childhood. Apparently, I watched him in a couple of movies before. Never quite noticed him, but yeah, I watched him in the first one movie and Pompeii, and yeah, so it's yeah, it's brutal. That's for sure. It's brutal. I suppose I don't know. Um, all I could think of is why all of this was necessary. Yeah, it was like a cascade of negativity, and it was just relentless. Relentless is truly what it was. It just never stopped, and people are only slightly less bad than others. Whole institutions were rotten as well, but there wasn't a single, apart from the teacher, a single sort of person who was really, just purely helpful. Um, and ironically, I suppose partially the one of the gang members' girlfriends, when I mean, she had ulterior motives, but she was also sort of helpful for a bit, although he wasn't receptive at all. Um, the whole thing, though, yeah, was like, I'm honestly surprised. Yeah, just if it's really his childhood. It said that it fictionalized some things, but how much? Um, the little I've read about his childhood, it seems, I mean, the background at least is similar. So it's not entirely sure though whether everything that happened there truly did happen or not, because others one go from that to seemingly relatively successful actor. Not that, I suppose much is required to be an actor, but I don't know. Um, just, well, yeah, I suppose, but um, just, if he really attempted suicide at one point, though, it seems quite an effort to go from such a low point to what is relative success. Like, most people, I think, are somewhere in between, usually much more consistently. But this guy went from down to up somehow. And sure enough, the acting industry isn't quite. It's more, it's more based on luck, I suppose. Just like, in fact, apparently he missed missed out on playing Black Panther, which went to Chadwick. Apparently, he might have played it himself at one point. 2009, I read. So that would have been quite a big part for him. I'm assuming the biggest it would be. Instead, it went to someone else. So that's being unlucky there. Of course, nothing in comparison to how much unlucky he was to have been in this situation. If truly he was in it, of course, he could have always, tried to avoid gangs as much as possible and such. But yeah, no, the psychology is sort of interesting. I suppose that this happens. It's also terrifying, though, how it could happen. Like, some people of all types and personalities and backgrounds sometimes do seem like that is one way for them to cope, i.e., to assimilate, which is why there is a projection abound. There is quite a lot of projection around in society, and these people simply complain about what is a personal sort of trait of such, and they simply complain or worse just because they haven't um, just haven't dealt with it yet, just haven't come to terms with it. Um, variety of things, really, whole variety. Of course, alternatively, one could always simply not interact with society. That works too. Hermits have always existed. Well, mostly, I guess, as much as possible. Uh, the thing with the oil, I'm not entirely sure what it was. It's like some sort of wish thing, and it appeared as well just before he attempted suicide. Um, yeah, I guess it is kind of like a rainbow, but not quite a rainbow. It's more like an oil effect. Yeah, it's probably one of the most brutal movies I've ever watched. Like, there's only one other movie that I can't sort of remember, although I don't quite remember the name of. It was possibly even more brutal. Well, yeah, well, possibly, I suppose, because the person in this other movie ends up being killed by their own family slowly, though, not just like instantaneously killed or anything. Yeah, so practically tortured and absolutely horrible. And it happened for real as well, which real biographies are always the worst. This was more of a it does hold psychological interest, but it's still very brutal for it to be really. I mean, I suppose it sort of reminded me also of the other incident where someone infiltrated sort of, but that was more of a sort of a clandestine sort of, you know, um, sort of spy thing. This was more of a something he joined them, not just to um, sort of, yeah, it's more about assimilation. So it goes even further. And yeah, just what's strange is that I read a bit about Tilbury, and there doesn't seem to be any major or any at all, any mentions at all of any incidents or anything. So I'm not entirely sure. I mean, what it was like in the 60s or 80s or something. I wasn't quite familiar with this part of history. Hmm. So yeah, probably do a bit, just a bit more research, but not too much. No. It's quite disturbing. Yeah, whole thing is disturbing, and this movie in particular was absolutely relentless. Um, I don't know. Was it only the as it was? No, I mean, he seemed to have thought that it was for some reason. I mean, and all the repeated words as well. It was too much, almost cult-like. It was really sort of drills.